Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future. And today, we're exploring a character amongst the horrors of the Death Guard, those traitor Astartes, or Space Marines, who fell to the worship of Nurgle during the Horus Heresy. And usually I kick off with a story, but only do so because sometimes the write-ups for these things, these units or beings, can be a tad dry. But the one thing I adore about the entire Death Guard Codex, its faction and its units, is that they are described in lurid details, more so than any other faction I can think of. The visionary simply leaps off the page. Hence we will not be beating around the bush in a tale, where the description herein contained is more than graphic enough for anyone to truly see how rancid these beings are. So, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, Noxious Blightbringers. The warped tolling of monstrous bells announces the coming of the Noxious Blightbringer. With every dolorous peal, splinters of madness and despair are driven into the minds of the foe, an ague of the soul leeching their vitality and leaving them nigh catatonic in the face of death. Heralds of pestilence and misery, Noxious Blightbringers pace solemnly before their Death Guard's advance. They proclaim the arrival of Mortarian's sons through the tolling of their rusted toxins of misery, hell-forged bells of massive size, whose peals ring through both reality and the warp. The primary role of Noxious Blightbringers is to sow dismay and weakness amidst enemy ranks. The dissonance of their chiming bells sends waves of entropy rolling across the battlefield to batter not only the enemy's physical senses, but their very souls. The blessings of Nurgle manifest wherever the toxins' waves hit home, each thunderous toll wearing the foe down a little more and spreading sickness and corruption. The enemy's will to fight erodes as their muscles fester and their strength leaves them. Faith and conviction are spider-webbed with cracks of doubt. Bones and organs shudder and turn green with furring growths. In close proximity, the empiric peals that roll from the Noxious Blightbringers torment enemy psychers. Not only must these unfortunates deal with the violent ways that threaten to overwhelm their tightly controlled abilities, but they must also face the corruption of the very powers they wield. Gnawing warp maggots wriggle into being within the minds of those psychers who show weakness, chewing hungrily upon their new host's sanity until the victim is driven irrevocably mad. With the tolling of the toxins corrodes the spirits of the Death Guard's enemies, it instills fresh vitality into the Legion's own warriors. Wherever they follow the Noxious Blightbringers into battle, Mortarian's sons move with a vigor that is at odds with their rotting bulk, rusted joints grating and guts swaying as they pound into combat. To be gifted with a toxin of misery is a great honor, bestowed by Mortarian himself upon only the most cruel and corrupt of his sons. Potent warriors in their own right, each Noxious Blightbringer becomes a living canker who revels in the spreading of disease and sorrow. Bludgeoning their way through the enemy ranks, the Blightbringers attempt to lodge themselves as deep within the enemy's lines as they can, the better to crush their spirit with the tolling of their awful bells. Every plague company counts Noxious Blightbringers amongst its ranks, but they are especially prevalent in the Vectorums of the Third. Such warbands as the Putrid Choir or the Dolorous Gnaw rarely take to the battlefield without 2 or 3 Noxious Blightbringers to herald them into battle. While Lord Gorthax the Morose is renowned for ensuring that 7 Blightbringers accompany him as a trudging retinue at all times. In the grueling sieges and meat grinders favoured by the Third Plague Company, the entropic shock waves of the toxins of misery are invaluable. They wear down the morale of the enemy even as they bolster the Death Guard, assuring that when one side finally breaks, it is not the sons of Mortarian. The Peel Yard. Deep within the bale swamps of the plague planet lies the Peel Yard, This fortress factory rings with a constant cacophony, for it is here that the toxins of misery are forged. The Pilyard is an interstice, existing upon the very cusp of the warp. Within, droning demon-smiths cast the cursed bells from the screams of dying psychers, beating runes of madness and misery into them under the watchful eyes of Lord Gothax's toll guard. End quote. Noxious Blightbringers, along with many of the warriors and abilities of Nurgle, are truly as depressing to fight as they are terrifying. I know I've said it before, but it really does bear repeating as often as we cover this faction. The unpopularity of it. For most warriors dream of victory, but when they do not, when they know the enemy cannot be beaten, know that they are outnumbered and outmatched, and there is no escape, and nothing for it but to put on a good show. It is the dream of most warriors that they at least go out well, that it is a heroic moment with a tangible gain. But this is not the way with battles against the Death Guard, or most forces sent by the Grandfather, for you are just as likely to hear the toll of this bell, and not only figuratively, but very actually, soil yourself as you run. And if you stand, if you resist the urge to run, as the toll of the bell strikes against your very soul, like someone walking over your grave, but instead it is like someone pouring feculent offal all over your soul. Even if you stand, you could as well have your innards liquidized, your lungs collapse, or your eyes rot out, before you even engage the creeping legion of the Death Guard. You do not even get to fight. You die of the pox doubled over somewhere in a ditch praying for death. And it is this element that makes fighting Nurgle less jolly than perhaps the imagery and avuncular demeanour of the Grandfather may imply. For few would wish such an ignoble death, and it has been for this reason that so many brave men and women have turned to Nurgle. Ones that would quite happily have died facing Khorne, without ever bending the knee, those who would face the confusion of fighting Tzeentch as if it were just any other day in the Militarum, or those who would happily ignore the lures of the demon of Slaanesh while attempting to bayonet them. But to die so unmanned, so unheroically, so miserably, this can be a step too far for even the bravest warrior, and has been the pathway to damnation for as long as the Grandfather has been active. It is one of the main reasons that of all of the Chaos Gods, I would least like to be visited by the attentions of the Grandfather, for his love is not the kind you want. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to the Noxious Blightbringers of the Death Guard. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing, and if you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make time for fun. Toodaloo.